At first, I didn't believe the twisted urban legends about Blackwood Ridge, a dense, suffocating stretch of old-growth forest up in the Pacific Northwest. Locals said the trees there grew too close together, that the shadows stretched longer than they should, and that people who went off the trails had a habit of staying lost. I always brushed it off as campfire folklore. That is, until my girlfriend Lily lost contact while live streaming a wilderness mukbang out there. Lily was a rising star on Twitch. Her niche was unique. She combined outdoor survival with extreme mukbangs, cooking and eating massive meals over open campfires. It paid well, which she desperately needed to cover her mother's mounting hospital bills. But Blackwood Ridge was supposed to be a simple weekend trip. When her signal dropped on Friday night, I assumed it was just bad reception. When she finally turned her stream back on 2 days later, things took a sharp, disturbing turn. The lighting was completely wrong. Instead of the warm, crackling glow of a campfire, she was lit by harsh, clinical LED panels. The food she consumed went from normal camping meals, like cast iron steaks and roasted vegetables, to increasingly disgusting things. Unidentifiable wild fungi covered in dirt, writhing, thumb-sized grubs, and eventually, chunks of foul-smelling raw meat. I sat in my apartment staring at my monitor in disbelief. I frantically spammed the Twitch chat, begging her to stop, typing in all caps, donating bits just to highlight my messages. But her glassy eyes stared right through the camera lens. She moved like an automaton, mechanically chewing and swallowing, her face devoid of any emotion. She never acknowledged me. Then came the night she held up a massive, blood-drenched shank of meat. It was unnaturally large, the bone jutting out at a grotesque, jagged angle. Fat and dark, coagulated blood dripped from the raw edges onto the wooden table. The chat, which was usually filled with supportive fans, had been hijacked by a swarm of anonymous accounts with default profile pictures. The comments exploded. "Is it just me? Or does that bone look way too thick to be an animal?" one user typed. "Bro, that red stuff is definitely not BBQ sauce," another chimed in. "Look at the marrow, that's a femur. Eat it now." My stomach churned violently. I lunged for my phone, calling her number for the 50th time that night. It went straight to voicemail. Suddenly, a whisper popped up in my DMs from an anonymous account named *Watcher_99*. "Don't call her," the message read. "She isn't the one holding the camera." My fingers trembled over the keyboard. "Who are you? Where is she?" "Look at the dark corner of the cabin in her stream," *Watcher_99* replied. "Adjust your monitor's brightness. Do you see the legs hanging from the ceiling? Now look closer at the shadows under her table. There's someone hiding there holding a hunting knife against her kneecap." I took a screenshot of the stream and threw it into Photoshop, cranking up the exposure. The blood drained from my face. In the upper left corner of the room, obscured by shadows, a pair of muddy work boots was dangling inches from the ceiling. And beneath the table, glinting in the harsh LED light, was the unmistakable serrated edge of a K-bar combat knife pressed firmly against Lily's jeans. Panic gripped my chest like a vice. I begged *Watcher_99* for help. The user, who later introduced herself as Audrey, claimed to be a private investigator specializing in cybercrime. She said she had been tracking a sick dark web live streaming ring operating out of the ridge. They targeted vulnerable influencers, forcing them to perform grotesque acts for high-paying, sadistic cryptocurrency donors. "If we went to the local cops," Audrey warned, "the syndicate would wipe the servers and bury Lily alive before a search warrant could even be drafted." We had to move quietly. We agreed to drive up to Blackwood Ridge together that very night. The drive took 6 agonizing hours. Audrey met me at a desolate gas station off the interstate. She looked the part of a seasoned investigator, sharp eyes behind wire-rimmed glasses, a worn leather jacket, and an aloof, hyper-vigilant demeanor. By the time my Jeep hit the gravel roads of the mountain base, dusk had swallowed the sky. The fog was impossibly thick, rolling over the hood of the car like waves of gray water. We rented a shabby off-the-grid cabin from a creepy local host named Miller. Despite being hundreds of miles north of the Mason-Dixon line, he spoke in a slow, unsettling southern drawl. His eyes lingered on me a little too long when he handed over the rusted brass key. Not many folks come up this way this late in the season, Miller rasped, chewing on a matchstick. Woods get awful quiet, awful hungry. I ignored him, grabbing my duffel bag and heading straight for our cabin. As soon as I stepped into the cramped bathroom to wash the grime off my face, a chill ran down my spine. Lying haphazardly on the rusted porcelain sink was a half-empty tube of Tom's of Maine * peppermint toothpaste. I picked it up, my hands shaking. Lily suffered from severe OCD. She was neurotically loyal to that specific brand and flavor. She couldn't use anything else without having a panic attack. She used to order it in bulk online. The cap was screwed on perfectly tight, the bottom rolled up neatly, exactly the way she did it. She had been in this exact bathroom. That night, the silence of the woods was deafening. There were no crickets, no wind rustling the pines, just a heavy, suffocating stillness. Exactly at midnight, a push notification lit up my phone, breaking the silence. Lily was live. I stared at the screen, my blood turning to ice. The peeling, water-damaged wallpaper behind her on the stream, with its faded, sickeningly yellow floral pattern, it was identical to the wall of the bedroom I was currently sitting in. I looked up from my phone, then back at the screen, the water stain shaped like a skull, the chipped paint on the baseboard. It was the same room. I bolted out of bed and rushed to Audrey's room across the hall, twisting the brass doorknob frantically, but the heavy wooden door was deadbolted from the inside. "Audrey! Audrey, wake up!" I hissed, pounding quietly on the wood. No answer. Just then, the floorboards at the far end of the corridor creaked. It wasn't the sound of an old house settling. It was the slow, deliberate sound of heavy work boots taking a step, then another. Asterisk creak, asterisk, asterisk creak, asterisk. The footsteps were slowly approaching my door. Someone was inside the cabin. Terrified, I backed away, slipped into my room, and locked the door as silently as possible. I grabbed my pocket knife, flipped the blade open, and cowered inside the narrow closet, hiding behind a row of moth-eaten winter coats. The footsteps stopped right outside my bedroom door. I held my breath, clamping my hand over my mouth. I could hear deep, ragged breathing on the other side of the thin wood. The brass doorknob slowly turned to the left, then to the right. It rattled, locked in place. The person stood there for what felt like an eternity before slowly walking away. I stayed in that closet, awake all night, paralyzed by fear, waiting for the sun to rise. The next morning, pale sunlight pierced through the dirty window panes. Audrey knocked briskly on my door, holding 2 cups of black coffee in styrofoam cups, looking completely unfazed. She claimed she had slept like a rock. I stared at her, searching her face for any sign of deception. Every instinct in my body screamed that something was horribly wrong, but we were stranded miles away from civilization with 0 cell service. If she was in on this, I couldn't risk confronting her alone deep in the woods. Swallowing my fear, I pretended everything was normal. I told her I just had a nightmare and followed her deep into the old logging trails to search for the broadcast location. We eventually split up to cover more ground, agreeing to meet back at a rusted logging tractor in an hour. As I pushed through a dense patch of overgrown pine trees and thorny blackberry bushes, I collided with someone. It was a young, emaciated girl wearing filthy denim overalls. She was muttering incoherently, violently scratching at her arms, clutching a rusty galvanized bucket swarming with live maggots and dead beetles. I recognized her immediately. She was the mute housekeeper we saw cleaning Miller's porch the day before. I hastily pulled out a crumpled, printed photo of Lily. "Please," I begged, my voice cracking. "Have you seen her?" The mute girl's eyes widened in sheer, unadulterated terror. She dropped the bucket, the maggots spilling over the pine needles. Instead of trying to speak, she bit down hard on her own thumb until it bled profusely and frantically smeared her blood against the bark of a massive pine tree. "Run! They watch!" She shoved a cracked, mud-caked iPhone into my hands before sprinting away into the thicket, disappearing like a ghost. I unlocked it. The screen flickered to life. My heart stopped. The camera roll wasn't just photos, it was a gallery of pure, unfiltered horror. There was Lily. She was strapped to a heavy industrial metal chair in a concrete basement, her eyes bruised and swollen. She was being force-fed raw, bloody entrails through a plastic funnel. Standing around her were 3 massive men. They weren't just wearing masks. They were wearing grotesque, rotting deer skulls, the antlers wrapped in barbed wire. But what caught my eye wasn't the blood or the visceral horror. It was the man holding the funnel. On his right wrist, visible where his flannel sleeve had rolled up, was a massive crescent moon-shaped burn scar. I ran as fast as my legs could carry me, branches whipping my face, desperately searching for Audrey. I needed to show her the evidence. I found her standing near a steep, rocky ravine, calmly smoking a cigarette. By her heavy leather boots sat a black garbage bag, dripping a dark, viscous fluid onto the dry leaves. "Audrey!" I yelled, panting heavily. "I found something! I know who has her!" As she reached out to take the phone from my hand, the sleeve of her leather jacket rolled up slightly. My blood ran cold. There, burned deep into the flesh of her right wrist, was a distinct crescent moon-shaped scar. My mind raced, connecting the dots in a fraction of a second. In the photos the mute girl had just given me, the masked man forcing the funnel down Lily's throat had the exact same scar. The footsteps outside my door last night, the fact that she brought me here. Audrey wasn't a private investigator tracking the dark web. She was prey who had been broken and molded into a predator. She saw my eyes dart to her wrist. Her expression didn't change, but she took a long, slow drag of her cigarette. "You always were too observant for your own good, Ethan." Before I could back away, before I could even scream, a crushing blow from an aluminum baseball bat slammed into the back of my skull. A towering man in a plaid jacket stood behind me. The world spun, fractured, and dissolved into static darkness. When I regained consciousness, the stench of rotting meat, bleach, and copper invaded my nostrils, making me gag. I was zip-tied tightly to a heavy metal chair in the center of a suffocatingly hot, soundproofed basement. Blinding professional-grade ring lights and high-end DSLR cameras on tripods surrounded me, pointing directly at my face. Sitting directly across the stainless steel prep table from me was Lily. She looked like a ghost, her skin pale and translucent, her eyes sunken so deep into her skull they looked like black voids. Yet she was smiling, a grotesque, forced, ear-to-ear grin, even as tears streamed endlessly down her hollow cheeks. "Ethan," she whispered, her voice raspy and broken, barely audible over the hum of the ventilation fans. "The medical bills for Mom, they were just too much. I'm sorry." "Lily, what is this? Who are these people?" I pleaded, struggling against the thick plastic zip ties biting into my wrists. "The rule here is simple," she sobbed, her manic smile never fading. "If you drag 2 replacement victims down into the meat grinder, they let you go. They let you go home." "I had to, Ethan. I had to." Audrey stepped out from the shadows behind the cameras. She took off her wire-rimmed glasses. Her demeanor completely changed from the helpful PI to a cold, dead-eyed psychopath. In her hand, she twirled a rusted heavy meat cleaver. Around her stood the hulking, deer skull-wearing men I had seen in the photos, laughing in deep, guttural tones as they adjusted the lighting panels, preparing for their next dark web broadcast. "Every man for himself, Ethan!" Lily suddenly screamed, her voice dripping with absolute primal madness. "You're a man! You can survive this! I'm sorry!" A massive guard, the one who had hit me with the bat, stepped forward and forced my head down onto the cold stainless steel table. A rusted metal tray was shoved under my chin. It was writhing with giant venomous centipedes and massive chunks of bloody, unidentifiable meat. The smell was enough to induce immediate vomiting, but the guard held my jaw shut. Audrey walked around the table and pressed the cold, rusted edge of the cleaver directly against my throat. "Start swallowing, Ethan," she sneered, pointing to a blinking red tally light on the main camera. "Your premium crypto subscribers are waiting. Don't disappoint them." I squeezed my eyes shut, my heart hammering against my ribs like a trapped bird. Mustering every ounce of adrenaline flooding my system, I planted my boots firmly on the concrete floor and kicked my legs upward with explosive force, launching the heavy steel table forward. It crashed violently into the guard, pinning his legs and sending the tray of gore flying into the expensive ring lights. Glass shattered, sparks flew, and the basement erupted into utter chaos. I didn't hesitate. I sank my teeth into the guard's forearm, tearing through the flannel and into the flesh until I tasted copper. He howled in pain, releasing his grip on my neck. I scrambled backward, the chair dragging with me until I managed to snap the cheap plastic zip ties on my wrists against the sharp edge of a broken light stand. Audrey shrieked in pure rage, lunging after me with the cleaver raised high. I slipped on the blood-slicked concrete floor, dodging the blade by inches, and smashed my shoulder against the wall. I scrambled up the narrow wooden stairs, my legs burning. Just as the massive guard grabbed me by the collar of my jacket to drag me back down into the kill room, a deafening siren pierced the night. Red and blue strobe lights flooded through the narrow, dirty basement window, illuminating the horror within. It was the state troopers. Before I was ambushed at the ravine, my paranoid gut feeling had saved my life. I had discreetly taken off my Apple Watch, with the SOS location tracking pinging my exact coordinates, and jammed it deep into the crevice of the back seat of the Uber we had taken to the edge of the woods. The driver had noticed it buzzing later, realized we were walking into a notorious cartel-run logging territory with no return trip booked, and called the cops. The troopers stormed the basement with assault rifles drawn, kicking the door off its hinges and pinning the masked men to the bloody ground. Audrey dropped the cleaver, raising her hands in mock surrender, screaming that she was a victim too. As paramedics strapped me to a stretcher and carried me up the stairs, placing an oxygen mask over my bruised face, I looked back down into the basement one last time. Lily was in handcuffs, pinned against the drywall by 2 officers, yet she wasn't looking at them. She wasn't looking at me, or the police, or crying for help. Her empty, soulless eyes were locked dead onto the shattered lens of a broken camera on the floor, and her jaw was still mechanically, rhythmically chewing a piece of raw, bloody meat she had snatched from the ground. She was still performing for an audience that wasn't there. Some horrors don't end when you escape the woods, because sometimes the real monster isn't the masked killers in the dark. It's what normal people become when they are desperate to survive.